Hello and welcome back, adventurers. This is Captain TTRPG, and today we're talking about Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Welcome back, adventurers. Today we are going to keep on running with our monk subclass, well, really stance, ranking videos. In the last video, we did all of the level 1 stances that you can take, but there are so many more stances you can take at higher levels. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to jump into all of the stances you can take at levels higher than 1, and rank those just like we did with the level 1 stances. Now, while you can't take them at level 1, so that does affect how much you can use them, I'm not going to try to hold that too much against them, although the higher level we get, I will start holding against the stances a little bit more because you just don't get access either until really late game or possibly ever, depending on where your game goes. So it doesn't make them as strong in my mind. But let's go ahead and talk about our stance ranking criteria. An S stance is one that is just mechanically stronger than others. It elevates what the class is capable of doing while taking advantage of the class's power. There shouldn't be any really big drawbacks here, and you should want to take the feats that are available from the stance. An A stance is one that provides a solid attack and ideally doesn't force you to use one, although it could be a case where it forces you to use one if it's good enough. And then the passives and the feats should always feel good. Even if maybe one or the other isn't mind-blowing, they're solid enough and they're certainly not a downside in any way. B is a stance that offers a useful attack. It might force you to use that attack or it might leave it open for you. The bonus you get is probably just fine or even just situational, but still valuable. And it might have a decent feat, it might not, but the feats probably aren't going to carry it. C is a stance that both doesn't have the best attack in the world and has situational bonuses. Also, the feats either aren't appealing or just don't really add much to gameplay. D is a stance that gives you an attack or feat or something that's just a trap. Something that's just obviously clearly bad, or that, by taking it, you're not going to actually make yourself any better than you had already been. And again, let's real quickly talk about what you get from taking a stance, because it is pretty uniform within monks. So the first is you're going to get, most of the time, a new unarmed strike, or at least some way to use weapons in a new way that is specific while you're in the stance. Then you're going to get some sort of passive buff while you're in the stance. It could be to your general abilities or it could be to your strikes themselves. And finally, it'll open up at least one feat at a higher level that you can take because you have the stance, with very few exceptions. There may be exceptions where if the stance comes online late enough, there may not be a feat related to it. Thankfully, there are a few less stances this time than we had last time, but it's not a lot less, so let's get in and let's get going. Starting with Shooting Stars stance. There is a prereq here where you have to have taken monastic weaponry at level 1. This opens up the use of weapons for your flurry of blows and things like that. And it does require level 2 to take this stance. The unarmed strike here is that you can use shurikens to do all of your flurry of blows and all that kind of stuff. And yes, it is optional. You don't have to do that. The improvement here is that you can use monk feats with shurikens, like you could with monastic archer stance and bows. There are no feats here. Nope, nothing builds off of this. That's what you get. So this is not the most exciting. It's good that you can take feats like stunning blows to use with flurry of blows and it still works for the shuriken, so that's great. And this is very similar in that way to monastic archer stance. Only with monastic archer stance, you not only got that, you got to choose all sorts of different bows along the monk trait or the other short longbow. And then you've got, of course, all the feats that build off of it. This time shurikens have a range of 20 feet. They're thrown, so you can add your strength to the damage, which is nice. But again, it's 20 feet, and then there aren't any feats at higher levels that require this, even though, there are some that do work with it, like pinning fire will still potentially work with this. It's not the worst stance, right? It's potentially okay. It's nowhere near the S rank that monastic archer stance was. So if you're going to go with a ranged stance, I just don't see why you would do this. I'm going to go ahead and give it a C. It opens up a different option, sure, but it's not going to blow anybody away, and it's not going to add anything brand new to monk, and it is incredibly narrow. Waterfowl stance. This has a prereq of, again, monastic weaponry and level 2. You don't get an unarmed stance. Instead, this is built around using the, and go with me here because I'm going to pronounce these very poorly, Dantpada, Scimitar, Talwar, and Zulfikar. No idea if that's how any of those are said, but we'll go with it. The passive upgrade you get is that when you successfully tumble through or leap over a creature while holding one of those 4 weapons, you deal 1d6 slashing damage or 2d6 with a greater striking room or 3d6 with a major striking room. So that's just for leaping over or tumbling through. We do have a feat here. It is Snakebird's Shadow. This is level 8, takes 2 actions. While wielding a sword with a monk trait, you're going to make attacks against all creatures in a 15-foot line. You get to make all these attacks before increasing your multiple attack penalty, and then you increase it all at once for every attack you made after the fact. This is a weird one. Not one of the 4 weapons listed has the finesse trait. So you are stuck with strength as your attribute, but then it wants you to potentially have a good acrobatics for tumble through. Granted, leaps wants athletics, so that's a good fit. The free damage while leaping or tumbling through is fantastic because free sources of damage while you're doing other things are exceedingly rare, especially sources that you can control in some way and aren't a response to enemy actions. The weapons themselves are interesting with varying traits. I like the Tall War. If I'm going to go strength anyway, it gives me the option if I want to two-hand it with the two-handed D10 option, which a little weird for a monk, but sure. And then, of course, it also has the forceful trait, which is good for monks. The feat I don't love as much. Don't get me wrong. Anytime that we can add some AoE, especially as a monk, is going to be good. But the line isn't the easiest thing to work with compared to other types of AoE, and it is only a 15-foot line, so it's pretty short, but you might get to, if you're really lucky, 3 creatures in a line like this, and you're only using 2 actions, so maybe it's okay as it does help you get things that are further away from you. As a monk stance goes, I think it's not bad, and it does open up new options for the class. I just wish at least one of the weapons had the finesse trait, especially since all of these has a d6 damage die anyway. All that being said, I do think this is an A, and you should probably get hold of the tumble behind feat if you plan to tumble through regularly. Cobra stance. This requires level 4. You get the Cobra Fang Strike. This is a D4 piercing, agile, finesse, deadly D10, venomous, which does 1 persistent poison damage, or 2 with greater striking. And you have to make these. It's the only thing you can make while in the stance. Your improvement is you get a +1 circumstance bonus to fortitude saves and DC, and poison resistance equal to half your level. There is one feat called Cobra and Venom. This is level 10, has 1 action. You strike, but an additional 5 feet to the reach for the strike. Your Venomous deals 1d4 poison damage per weapon damage die instead of the normal amount that Venomous would normally do. Just having this feat increases your fortitude save bonus and DC bonus to a +2. All right, so at first look, it's not ideal, right? We've got the D4, which is just terrible, and you can only make these strikes. The deadly D10 is nice, but it doesn't really make up for the low damage die size generally, right? This in Fatal is not going to upgrade them all. It's just going to add 1 at the end if you crit. Interestingly, there aren't that many creatures immune to poison damage. No, instead they are immune to actions with the poison trait. This unarmored attack doesn't have the poison trait, meaning they aren't immune. So your base strike is actually somewhat reliable at least, and Venom, unfortunately, does have the poison trait, and a massive number of creatures are immune to it. On top of that, there is exactly 1 creature out of the 3,365 on Archives of Nethys that has a weakness to poison damage. 1. Now, unless I searched poorly, which of course is always possible. Still, it is interesting and really bumps up the persistent damage, if it does hit that 1. Anyway, that's nothing worth talking about. It certainly isn't as bad as I thought it was at first glance, but nothing here makes it good. As interesting as it is to have this kind of attack, it's just not going to feel strong, and the feat is terrible with so many immune creatures. This is a C. It's just not picking itself up. Peafowl stance requires monastic weaponry and level 4. You can use swords with the monk trait in 1 hand with this, and you have to use them to be in the stance. When you successfully strike with the required weapon, so a sword in 1 hand with the monk trait, you can step as a free action immediately after, once per round. There is 1 feat called Peafowl Strut. It is level 10, takes 1 action. You step twice, then strike. Being Legacy, this feels like the pre-master Waterfowl stance. It has both less interesting and less powerful focus because it just has fewer options for weapons. Yes, as with any build using monastic weaponry, you can take feats that just normally require unarmed strikes, but the unarmed strikes given by many of the other stances are actually better than a lot of the finesse weapons that we can use anyway, and the passive bonus here is just... Even if mechanically good in some situations, they don't excite or offer anything truly unique. Again, we already talked about a much better version of this that was an A rank. This is the other end. This is C rank. It's just not worth taking. Clinging Shadow Stance requires level 8, and you have to have key spells. This gives you the unarmed attack of Shadow Grasp. It is a D4, does void damage, has the grapple, agile, and reach traits. You don't have to make these while in the stance either. Your improvement is a +2 circumstance bonus to your grapple checks and to the escape DC to get out of your grapples. There is one feat here tied to it called Shadow's Web. It's level 14, takes 2 actions, and is a focus spell. So we're really down on the focus spells here. All creatures in a 30-foot emanation have to make a basic fortitude save against 14 D4 void damage with greater effects depending on, failing or critically failing. And this goes up by 2d4 every spell rank. So the stance does take a focus spell to enter, which is interesting because it means it has to be a pretty good stance to use a focus spell to do it. The base damage here isn't good, but the traits are solid. Reach plus grapple can make you a mighty grappler. Combine that with the passive, and this is a really strong grapple stance. Then add in a very solid, if scary to allies, AoE that does an average of 35 damage on a fail. With a nice little package, it's level 8, and that is tough, but it's good in almost every measure. So I'm going to give it an A, and I think I'm going to get a lot of people disagreeing with me, but it's specifically A if you're going to go a grapple build using it. If you're not going to use it to grapple, I think it's a B at best, possibly a C. Ironblood stance. Level 8, you gain the Iron Sweep attack, which is a D8 bludgeoning damage with sweep and parry. And yes, you can use other strikes. You don't have to just make these. Your improvement is you get resistance to all damage. All damage. Increases by 1 every 4 levels. There's one feat called Ironblood Surge. This is level 14. Takes 1 action. You gain a +1 to your AC, and your resistance is equal to your strength modifier if that's higher than what it naturally is on its own until the start of your next turn. The strikes here are pretty solid, but they aren't any better than some of the strength-based attacks we got from level 1 stances, so it's nice, but it doesn't open anything brand new up. The flat damage resistance is, honestly, it's just nutty. Yes, it's a small number, but it's to everything. Right? Just absolutely every type of damage, which is truly crazy. Targeted damage, AoE, persistent damage, everything. It affects everything. This is just so much stronger than having half your level to one type of resistance. Which, those are even all right. Like, those aren't a bad thing to have. But this is just miles above that. This always matters. It is the best defensive boost of any stance thus far. Sadly, the feat is not great. It's basically the same as raising your arm to gain the parry trait, I guess. And at most, it'll add 2 resistance. Though generally, it'll only add 1 resistance, depending on how you've built yourself. Like I said, at most, it'll boost it up by 2 resistance for that 1 turn. I don't know that that's worth taking as a feat, but it's okay. I mean, it's really good if you wanted to parry anyway. Otherwise, again, I don't know that it's worth the action. When we put it all together, it's solid, but it's not mind-blowing, and it doesn't add anything to the monk kit that we haven't really seen so far, so I'm going to give it a B. It's still solid, but I just don't think it's amazing, and I would probably take this, though, in a heartbeat if I take the Fuse stance feat later on, because at that point, you just gain this lovely damage resistance without even having to worry about the strike of the feat. Jellyfish stance, level 8. Gives you the Stinging Lash strike. This is a D6 slashing finesse with reach. And yes, you have the option to use it, but you don't have to. You get a +2 circumstance bonus to reflex saves and to checks to squeeze and escape while in this stance. There are no feats that build off of it. Reach on an unarmed strike is really good. On top of that, you have the option to go dex, and you don't even have to use these strikes in the stance if you don't want to. The bonus to reflex saves is always good, but what I really like is the escape bonus. So many creatures grab, and you don't see a bonus like 2 escapes almost ever. Sadly, there are just no feats, but it's not the end of the world. That means there's no bad feats either. I'm going to still give it a B because of the unique aspects of the bonus and the strike. So I do think it's worth considering and could be a really nice second stance for, again, stance fusion. Kaiju stance, level 8. You have to have encountered a kaiju. DMs, if somebody really wants to take this, maybe don't make that a requirement. It feels unnecessary, but hey, it's here. You make Shattering Earth strikes. These are D8, bludgeoning, backswing, and fatal D12 with reach. It's a lot of traits. You have to make these while you're in the stance. So while in the stance, you are large. Even if you are already large, you're still large. If you weren't large, you now are large. You just are large. And clumsy 1. On a successful strike with a shattering earth attack, all creatures other than you within 10 feet of the creature that you hit, including the one that you hit, take 1 point of bludgeoning splash damage per weapon damage die. Also, you just ignore difficult terrain while in the stance. There are 2 feats here. World-breaking footfall, this is level 14 for 2 actions. All ground in a 20-foot emanation becomes difficult or greater difficult terrain if it was already difficult. All other creatures within this area get a basic reflex save against 7d6 bludgeoning damage, and it does have a 1d4 cooldown to it. 1d4 turn cooldown to it. Then we have Wake of Devastation at level 20. Your strikes gain the Raising trait, which means they'll be good at destroying buildings. When you hit with a strike, terrain under you becomes difficult terrain, just permanently, just becomes difficult terrain. And when you hit a creature standing on difficult terrain, it becomes immobilized until it succeeds at an escape check. All right, let's start out by just saying the theming here is on point. The attack has fantastic traits, but will require strength. Reach here with large is especially good, right? The number of squares you're going to threaten is really large. Also, while deadly doesn't blow me away on the monk, fatal is strong enough to be truly threatening because it'll turn all of your dice into that upgraded size. I don't love clumsy here. Obviously, you're going to have a lower AC while in this stance, and you're already not based on dex, so it's kind of 2 hits against that there. The base splash damage is interesting if low, but could trigger weaknesses, and yes, it will hit allies, so just be aware of that. Again, it's not a ton of damage. Ignoring difficult terrain just outright, while circumstantial, is really solid. Then we have the feats. An AoE that creates difficult terrain is just good. And with teamwork, it can be amazing. Then you have the fact that it's AoE damage, which Monk just wholly lacks, generally speaking, unless you take key spells. And finally, at level 20, okay, you've got a feat here that's fine. It's nice, it's a passive upgrade. It's not blowing my mind, but it's good. It's a good passive upgrade. If this was a level 1 stance and the feats were low level, obviously, to accompany it, I would say that this was S tier. Given that this is level 8 and the feats are higher level, 14 and 20, I'm going to go with A, but it's still a really good stance. All right, we're up to Tangled Forest stance. This is level 8. Gives you the Lashing Branch strike, which is a D8 slashing, agile, and finesse, and you can make it, but don't have to. Any creature in your reach trying to move away must succeed at a reflex save, acrobatics check, or athletics check against your class DC, or be immobilized for that action. So just pinning creatures down. There is one feat at a higher level. It is at level 14 called Tangled Forest Rake. It takes 1 action. You strike, and if you hit, you reposition the creature up to 10 feet, even moving it through your space. Reposition can be strong, but this is a much stronger version of it. This is yet another good choice, offering dex or strength given the finesse on the strike. The passive ability to hold creatures near you is extremely powerful, especially as you can choose to let them leave if you want to let them leave, or you can try to force them there. Also, nothing ever becomes immune to it. The strike is something we've seen plenty of times before. It's good, but doesn't stand out. The feat is actually really strong. Normally, I don't love reposition because, again, I don't think it's the strongest of our athletics abilities. But you're getting it here for free, and you can move them quite a bit further, which makes it quite a bit stronger. I don't think it's strong enough to elevate it up to an A, but I do think it's a solid B, and I do think it's worth a look. All right, Wild Winds stance. This is level 8 and requires key spells. You can take a key spell to get into it. You've got the Wind Crash Strike, which is a D6 bludgeoning with a range of 30 feet with the propulsive trait and agile. And yes, you can make them, but you don't have to. As far as passive abilities go, your attacks ignore concealment and all cover, and we get a +2 circumstance bonus to AC against ranged attacks. There are 2 feats here. The first is Wild Winds Gust at level 14 for 2 actions. You make a Wind Crash Strike against all creatures in a 30-foot cone or a 60-foot line. All of these count toward multiple attack penalty, but only after you make them all. And then we have Electric Counter at level 16. This is a reaction. When you would take damage, you can use this to gain electricity resistance equal to your level until the start of your next turn. This does apply to the triggering damage, by the way. And if the triggering damage was from a melee attack, the attacker takes 3d6 electricity damage as well. So this is a solid range strike at a decent level still. You're level 8, that's perfectly valid. Propulsive is fantastic to add damage since it is ranged, right? So you get to add half your strength on here. Both bonuses are great as well. The AC boost against range makes a lot of sense because you are ranged, so you might be better to target with ranged strikes. The other bonus we saw with Monastic Archer, and it's just as strong here, so just good on top of good. Sorry, the first feat here is good given that the massive AoE size here, right? This is a 30-foot cone. You should easily be able to pull 3, maybe even 4 creatures in a regular style battle against like minions and stuff in there, so that's really good. I'd probably use that and not the line. So this means you can probably deal some decent damage with this AoE. The other feat is pretty narrow, but the melee return damage is actually pretty broadly applicable. Like electricity damage will work a lot of the time. Yes, you want to stay out of melee in this build, but if it does happen and you get run up on, at least you can punish them for it. I think this makes the ideal stance to kind of throw in your back pocket if you don't want to go with Monastic Archer and you want to be melee most of the time. You can throw it out, you know, with one quick action, get into the stance. Yes, it requires a focus point, but you toss it into the stance. And then you can suddenly just throw your wind attacks at flying creatures. This is an A for me. Honestly, I think this hits all the marks to really up what a monk can do. Whirling Blade stance. This requires monastic weaponry, and you have to be level 14 to take it. This works with melee monk weapons with the finesse trait, and you can choose to do this, but you don't have to on the stance. When you're using these weapons, they gain the thrown 10 feet trait. When you throw such a weapon as a strike, your next strike can start from the point where the first one happened from, and so on. At the end of your turn, it comes back in a straight line unless it's blocked by something, and then it just drops on the floor. So, to help you understand this, I throw my weapon at a creature 10 feet away. And then, for my second strike, I make the weapon fly at a creature 10 feet from it. And then in a third strike, I can fly at another creature within 10 feet. Anyway, you're flying your weapon around. Sadly, there are no feats tied to this stance. There are enough weapons that fit to give you some choices here. It is certainly unique, but I just don't see what it's got over either Shooting Star or it's nowhere even near the Monastic Archer. Like, they don't even live in the same world. It's a fun gimmick. It's kind of a cool idea, but it just doesn't hold up to any other stance almost. This is a C. It's not terrible, and it is somewhat unique, but it's just not good enough, especially at this level. And finally, Vitality Manipulating Stance. This requires level 20. You gain the Vitality Blast, which is a D4, does negative damage, so this is a pre-master, has a range of 30 feet, versatile, with the positive trait. Anyway, you can make these, but you don't have to. If you have Stunning Fist, you can force a save against a different effect. There are no fees for this, because this is already level 20. And yeah, so very unique, for the most part, minus your Wild Wind stance, which is a better version of this lower level. The damage types are interesting, but the damage is terrible. The effect to replace Stunning Blows is just okay for level 20, and it just isn't enough. Honestly, you've waited all the way to get to level 20 for this. It was already replaced by Monastic Archer stance at level 1 and Wild Wind stance at level 8. It doesn't even add anything good. There's no feats to build on it. The one passive ability here, I don't even think is good. Honestly, this is a stance I think you should stay away from. If you're getting up to level 20, probably take anything other than this at level 20. This is terrible. This is my only D. And there it is. We've done it. Up on screen, I'm going to put all of the stances together on one screen. So yes, there might be some that are really hard to see. I'm sorry if they're really small. But hey, I wanted them all on one thing. So here you go, all of them. We have everything from an S down to a D on here, just barely. Did I get anything wrong? Is Vitality Manipulating Stance the best stance ever and I just hated on it for no good reason? Let me know in the comments, and as always, adventure on.